For a great cup of joe, there's one thing you should know. Your morning brew can also be playful. Buff Boy Brewing guys make the temperature rise, and you surely feel naughty when you swallow our coffee. If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some more, rest assured. Buff Boy Brewing, you can't get enough of.
It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble. You know, it was one of those moments when you look back and you say, do you remember where you were when? And in this instance, I'm talking about the pandemic, the corona, the COVID. I've never liked the word COVID. I'm not sure why. I've always still said just corona or the corona. But, and I realize this is now, 6 years ago already. But the reason why it came up in our office was that it was 5 years ago that the world, or at least in our neck of the woods, was starting to reopen, and I just finished our syndicated radio show. I had wrapped up the 15-year run of our 2-hour top 40 music show, and we were taping in Nashville, and we had the big send-off there, the last segment, from the center stage of the Grand Ole Opry. And our group was just talking about that, going, can you believe, because you know how your phone, sometimes if you have an Android phone, it'll give you the memories 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Well, it came up 5 years ago, and it was a bunch of the pictures from Nashville. And I remember that Nashville had, quote unquote, reopened, meaning no masks or anything like that. But in Canada, because I kind of left West Hollywood when the cases of corona were kind of getting out of hand, and it was safer to be in Canada. So I ended up coming home to Canada. And in Winnipeg, my hometown where we have a house, the city was not reopened yet. So it was kind of one of these situations where it's like you're going from a city that's locked down to one that's open, and it's hopeful because you're just like, I don't want to deal with these goddamn masks and all this stuff anymore. But then you're so used to it because we did, a year and a half of lockdown and everything and not being around people. And so it was a little bit strange too, right? Going, and it didn't help that I had my negative and pessimistic and worrywart mother going and saying, oh, you're stupid. You're going to get something. You're going to catch it. Because just, by automatically going on a plane and then going to another city, that means that you're going to test positive. That's just what happens. That's how it went. So this week on the show, I'm going to talk about kind of my whole, I was going to say my whole existence during it, because really what was anybody doing during it, right? But anyway, I'm going to walk you through kind of where I was when, and then I didn't have very much dramatic stuff happen. My husband and I, neither of us still to this day has ever contracted it. We've never tested positive. And I also just want to put it out there right at the very beginning that I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm vaccinated, and I had to be to get on a plane and go to another country. I had to be vaccinated, had to be tested so many times. So I'm not going on a rant about the vaccines and politics. I'm not doing anything about that. There's nothing about politics. There's nothing about that. What I'm just saying is, in hindsight, you can look back at the things that we were doing or the things that we were made to do, and then you're kind of like, yeah, that was a bit silly. So maybe you'll relate to some of these things, and we'll talk about that on the Scribble right after this.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
JB here on The Scribble. It's no secret I've been an entertainment host and, celebrity reporter and correspondent, whatever, for over 20 years now. And I've been in the news business for even longer, newspaper columnist for 20 some years. And that was in my early 20s yet. So news has always been fascinating to me. I love a good breaking news story. And not like breaking news like you see it on CNN today. This is when it was actual... there's an emergency landing of a plane and you're watching it going, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Like CNN obviously has changed a lot since then, but that was the kind of stuff that I liked. We don't know, we got word of this, let's go to this city and we're going to watch it now. We're going to take it from the local station. We're going to see. It had me on the edge of my seat and I loved it. So anyway, so that question of where were you when the pandemic hit? Where were you when you first heard about coronavirus, right? Or 19 or COVID-19, whatever it was. That was another thing. Why did it have to be rebranded halfway through? So anyway, my grandma was in a home and she had a dementia, whatever. So, she was... sort of in poor health as it was anyway. But on Wednesday nights, oh shit, now I'm pausing. Was it Wednesdays? I'm pretty sure it was Wednesdays. There was bingo at her home. Now, the interesting thing is that the home was actually not too far from my house. And so because my aunt, uncle, and my mom, her kids, kind of alternated going to go visit her, and we've got a really large family, so it was almost certain that at least somebody in the family would visit her every day. That was just, and, she remembered you and but you couldn't really have conversations and things. So you might do a puzzle, you might do, she had a coloring book, you might even just go for a walk, right? So I'm pretty sure it was Wednesdays. They had bingo night at her place, Ukrainian Baba, right? So I'll go and play bingo with her, whatever. I don't care. I mean, whatever. And so again, I was close by, so I'm like, 5-10 minutes away. So I would go there at about 4:30 or so, I think it was. And then bingo started at whatever time. So I'd go up to a room and it was great because the nurses, obviously we were all there so often, the nurses knew that we were there for Elsie and, Jeremy's here. So I'd either just go to her room or if she was sitting out watching TV or something. And so we went downstairs where they would play bingo and there were prizes like a little bag of chips and, a hairbrush or a little stuffed animal or something. Again, these are people that don't really, So we played bingo and then we went upstairs and then we were doing a puzzle. And so they had the TV on in the sitting room. Well, it's also the dining room. I don't know, whatever. But in the room where they were all kind of hanging out in the evening. So we're doing the puzzle and the nurses are kind of going back and forth. And on, I think it actually might have been CNN. I just mentioned CNN. They talked about the NBA games getting canceled. And so that seemed a little bit strange. And then all of a sudden, they start talking about Tom Hanks. You remember, right? He was kind of the first celeb to catch it, to get it. And so the nurses are kind of walking back and forth. Now, again, they're nurses, so they understand, health and whatever. So they're kind of looking at this going like, that's really kind of weird, and then especially to, cancel sporting events and things like that. And you have to remember that this audience in this home, again, these are people with dementia and whatever. I mean, they don't, and I'm not making a joke. They don't even know where they are, most of them, so it's not like they're going to understand. That's my point. They're not going to see that on television and get freaked out. That's all I'm saying. I'm not making fun because, So then my grandma did she was wondering what everybody was looking at on the TV. And I said, I was talking about basketball or something. And I mean, how are you going to explain that to her? Because we didn't even really know what it was. We didn't know what was happening. And so, we finished the puzzle, whatever it was. They give her kind of like a little dessert kind of a thing before bed, and I had one too. And I went and, said goodbye. We always had to kind of make a weird escape because she would want to go with us. So we had to sort of either get her in her room and then say, all right, well, I'll go and ask them for whatever, an orange juice or something. And then I just wouldn't come back. And then the nurses would come in and distract her. And then she would forget that I left anyway. It feels so deceptive and mean at the time, but otherwise you're going to sit there and she's just going to go through this emotional crying thing for the next 30 minutes, right? Why stress her out and put her through that? So at least she doesn't remember that I was there. They've distracted her and now she forgets that I'm long gone. Anyhow, that was the last time that I ever saw her. Because they then shut down, the nursing homes, care homes, and all those things for a good, oh, I'm sorry. No, whoa. I got to stop there. That's actually, that's incorrect. I apologize. I'm sorry. Sorry. That's not the last time I saw her. Strike that. Strike it. It was the last time that I went for bingo. It was the last time that I went inside there for bingo. So, you can't see her, right? And this isn't a place where, they've got video call. She doesn't have Facebook and a phone that she's just, video calling us. So I didn't see her. So that was March, I think it was. Was it March when it all happened? A few months ago, my birthday is in August. And so we were able to go and have an outdoor visit. That, right? Remember that was, I don't know if it was like the same where you are, but you could only have, you had to be 6 feet apart. You could only have like 2 people in your backyard, whatever it was. At least that's what they did in Winnipeg. So we were able to go, but again, we had to sit, across from a table. It had to be outside. So I did see her for my birthday. So I take it back. That was not inside playing bingo, was not the last time that I saw her. So I did get to see her for my birthday that year. And then I think that was it. And it's tough because she doesn't understand, like, why do I have to wear this thing on my face, right? Like, why is everybody wearing this? Why are these people, the nurses were basically dressed in, hazmat suits is essentially what it was, because they would sometimes they had like a tablet, I think they ended up giving them, so that you could do video calls. She was doing video calls with, like, my parents and, like her kids. She wasn't doing it with the grandkids because, there's only like 1 or 2 tablets to go around for everybody. So it's not like she's going to, so they would take a picture on the tablet and then they would send it to my mom. And so then my mom would text it to my brothers and me. And yeah, here she is, sitting and coloring. And this person is dressed like they're going to fucking space because, they're in this giant, plastic looking outfit. And then eventually my grandma got it because, that's what was happening in a lot of those homes, right? Is that the staff would go home, they would come back, and the testing was, it was too late at that point after you've already tested positive. Like, you've already got it. Well, now it's too little too late if you've already worked another shift or whatever, and then you test the next day. Well, and that's what happened is it went through, and then eventually my grandma got it, and she died from it in November. Because it was, I believe it was it on Black Friday? It was in November. It was around American Thanksgiving because we were, yeah. So that's the story about like where I was when I heard about it, and then the path for how things played out with my grandma, and she died from it. And I think that that's one of the hardest things, right? Because you can't explain to her. We also didn't get a chance to say goodbye even too. And, she's sick and she's going. The one good thing was that my mom said that she didn't have any symptoms and it wasn't like she was really, really, ailing from it, which is, that's what you hope. You don't want to hear about her being deathly ill and, and taken down by this thing. So if there was one sort of, I'll use the word positive in it, it was that she wasn't suffering with it. She wasn't, in pain from it. It just, eventually took her. Towards the end, anyway, she was, I guess, in pain. So that was that. Now, back to the radio show thing that I was talking about. So now we're fast forwarding. We were taping travel tourism programming. We taped that about 3 or 4 times a year for our shows. So I had just gone with Suzanne, our producer. We'd gone to Fort Lauderdale in February. So this was 2020. So this is before everything shut down. So we had taped 2 travel shows all over Fort Lauderdale. And then we also, at the same time, we were there for our men's swimwear company, and we were doing photo shoots with people in the different products. We had some models lined up, and we did some photo shoots there. So this was in beginning or mid-February. And then we got back, and, that was kind of the last time that there was regular travel for several years. And then when the world kind of shut down and, airlines, whatever, you couldn't leave. Well, as a journalist, that was an essential service. So I was able to still travel and go around. We were still able to be out and about. The thing was, though, we still had to do the tests. We had to be vaccinated, first of all, and then we had to do a test in Canada before we could even leave, because we apparently had to show paperwork at the U.S. border. And then we had to be tested on the way back. So I had to go, this is now fast forward to June, I think we did the Nashville thing, right? And then we had to be tested there, get a good negative result. Because when I come back to Canada, I'm going to have to show that at the border. I'm going to have to be tested at the border again, even though I was just tested literally hours earlier. They're going to test me again. The planes were empty, by the way. This was actually really interesting because I flew out of Winnipeg. That morning that I flew to go to Nashville, the check-in area where they have the kiosks and things like that at the airlines, literally empty with passengers. Not one passenger. Go through security, you usually got at least one line, two lines, maybe three, and a line. Zero people. It was just right up to the metal detector, put my stuff in the bins, collect my things, and go. So then you get on and then the boarding area, I was just kind of like, there's really nobody sitting here. I think I ended up taking a picture of the plane inside. There were not more, I didn't do an actual head count, but there were not more than 10 people flying. Now, we had to go because the Canadian government did something stupid. They stopped international flights from every city except, I believe, 5 of them. And so Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, and then something else. I can't remember the 5 of them. But anyway, so we had to go from Winnipeg to Toronto. So, central Canada to east, and then down to Nashville, which is a very weird, you're basically making kind of like a number 7 almost in that regard, rather than going just, Winnipeg, Chicago, and whatever. So international flights were not departing from Winnipeg. So you have to show a test when you get to the U.S. border, right? You have to show the airline, first of all, that you were vaccinated and you had your test. So I get to U.S. Customs, which was in Toronto. Just like in Winnipeg, if you're going from Winnipeg to the U.S., you go through U.S. Customs in Canada. So I'm in Toronto. Again, not very many people at the border or at customs and going through. So she's, checking my passport. She's asking things. And then I'm like, did you need my test results? Like, did you need to see that? She ended up just taking the paper as a formality. It was kind of like, well, he's offering it. She didn't ask for it. She didn't care. I didn't have to show it. And I thought, did I not have to spend $200 to get this certain kind of a test, at a lab? I had to go to a lab. I had to go to a fucking lab and pay almost $200 just to get a Q-tip swabbed. And I heard about these tests, by the way, that people were getting it like shoved all the way like up or down, whatever, their nose and practically down their throat. The ones, I only ever had one where they took, it was almost like a Q-tip, a cotton swab, and just, just the inside of my nostril. That was the only kind of test I had. I never had anything that was that, probing. So I'm at the Toronto airport, and then you connect from Toronto to Nashville or whatever it was. And again, the plane was pretty much empty because, again, you're going from Canada to the US, and people weren't allowed to do that. And there's a bit of nervousness because, like I said, I had my mom squawking, going, "Oh, you're nuts. I wouldn't travel now." Well, she doesn't travel anyway, so fuck off. But I just, hearing this, you're basically being told you're going to get it. Because you've traveled, you're going to get it. Because you went on a plane, you're going to get it. You went to another country, you're going to get it. So that's sort of in the back of your head, even though you're just like, whatever, shut up, people. So you have to remember that Canada is still wearing face masks and still doing that whole thing. So then to come to Nashville, now you still did have to wear the mask in the airport. That was one of those things because I think it was like federal property or territory or whatever, and it was still the mandate or whatever you want to call it. And then once you left the airport, then you could just, take it off. But people were just kind of having it like the mask pulled down and talking or whatever, right? And then if all of a sudden somebody from the airport's walking around, they would put their mask up. But so our flight landed in Nashville early evening, and then by the time I got to the hotel, it was already dark, and it was, I think, maybe about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And it was a little bit weird because, again, that city was, vaccinated and open, and, there wasn't social distancing. And so I get to this hotel that we were staying at, and I just hear the music from all the clubs. Like, it was just, thumping and thumping. And so I check into the hotel, and again, I'm a media guest, so they kind of have like a welcome drink and whatever for me. And it's a little bit weird, right? Because after all that time, and you've had to like stand away from people, and you had to wear masks, like to now go into the lobby of this hotel, and you see people sitting in the lounge and whatever, and it's like, this is weird because I haven't seen this in so long. Meanwhile, the very first time that I saw everyone wearing masks was a weird moment, right? Like, it kind of has this flip now. So I go up to the room, I put my things, and I'm going to sneeze. Give me 2 seconds. So is it coming? Here we go. Oh yeah, we keep it all in this show. We're not editing that out. We're keeping it in. Speaking of Corona, right? So I dump my things in my room, and then I come downstairs and I go outside, and just around the corner is this like fiddle music, like in this band, and I don't know who it was performing, but again, sidewalk is packed with people, the bar is packed with people, and now I'm back into that, oh my god, this feels like a super spreader event, because that was the term that was coined during, different events and things. So then I'm walking outside, and I'm walking down, is it called Broadway? I don't even remember. Where there's that whole strip of all the bars and honky-tonks and music and everything. And the city was alive. And it was, I believe, a Wednesday night that I got there. Did we tape Wednesday to Friday? I don't remember. It was during the week anyway. And I just remember thinking, my God, my hometown isn't even this wild on a regular weekend outside of a pandemic. And so the fact that it was a weekday night and we're now going on 10, 11, midnight, that was a city that was ready to just, enjoy life again. So we had a whole itinerary planned of different activities and events, and I would tape a segment here, and I'd interview this person, I'd go and do this, and I would be wearing my mask when I went in. So we went to the like a science museum or whatever it was, and so I'd always have my mask when I go in, and they would always tell me right away, we're all vaccinated, we are all negative, we all test, whatever, so you can take your mask off if you want, you can keep it on. But I actually kind of felt like an outcast the moments that I did have it on, so I would gradually eventually just sort of take it off. Maybe there were some times when I took it off right away, but I know that it would only stay on for like a minute or so when I was just like, oh, okay, great, thanks. But I'd leave it on, and then a minute later it would come off. And again, you just kind of feel like there's this like, okay, I'm free. And so we do the 3 or 4 days or whatever it was there, taping all these different shows. I had to go by myself, but I was, the tourism people were there assisting because producers or whatever couldn't travel. I was the actual journalist, so I was allowed to go. Now we booked into the itinerary. I've got to find a lab that I can go and get tested. And it was the day that I was flying out. So, we kind of had to do it earlier in the day, and then you're sitting there waiting going, I need my fucking results. If I don't get those, then I can't get on the plane, and then I can't go home, and then this throws off everything. So I go and I get the test, and then we taped another segment, and then they had called and said, okay, your results. So then I go back, and there's this weird moment where you're actually kind of thinking that you do have it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of strange where I'm like, I've got nothing, I'm, whatever, I should be fine. But now you're anxious, right? You're kind of like, oh my God, maybe I do have it. What happens if I have it, Sure enough, I don't have it. And then I get my paperwork, I get it stamped and everything. And so I go and we finish taping whatever we were doing that afternoon. And then I go to the airport, put the mask on again, get on the plane. There's not as many people going Nashville to Toronto. I land in Toronto. It was like a weird, like we were in a science lab. So you had, things covered in plastic. You had fake, or not fake, but like, tarp walls and just, plastic tarps everywhere, and people wearing, again, hazmat suits. And it was just so strange. And I mean, it was very, very serious. It was very intimidating in the sense of, is this an airport, or like, where the hell am I? So you land in Toronto, you have to go through this, they've got tablets, so that you've got to get your name, and then you have to have your passport, you had to have your test shown, the test results shown, and then you had to be tested, so you had to go into like a little booth with somebody, and, this is one of those situations where it's like not innocent until proven guilty. It's like you're positive until you're proven negative on these tests. So everybody is treated like they have it. And then, so you have your test, you get the results. Now in Canada, they had something called the hotel quarantine. It was very controversial. It later was discovered that this really was pointless. And so what you had to do was you had to go into a quarantine hotel. These were ones that the government has designated. You had to pay, I think it was upwards of $200 or $300 a night. So talk about price gouging. So you got price fixing in it because it had to be a hotel they've approved and one that, you had to pay for, I believe it was 3 nights. So even if you got your test results that same day, you were still having to pay about I think it ended up being almost $2,000 because of, you had to also then pay for the security and whatever, and then very quickly there were stories on the news about how, the food was terrible. They would have people going from the airport in a shuttle bus, so with all these other passengers, and then being in a conference room at the hotels or in the lobbies, and then you're kind of like, wait a second, so the purpose of hotel quarantine is to keep me away from other passengers and other people, but meanwhile you're herding them like cattle into these big rooms. It's a little bit defeats the purpose then, doesn't it? And then there were sexual assaults that were happening in some of the cities, and you had people who were saying they were basically just driven in a van, not told where they were going. They weren't allowed to contact their family. You'd almost think these were ICE raids. When I describe that, I'm talking about Canada during the pandemic, right? So hearing all these stories, and I said, well, I have a house, a very big house in Winnipeg that, I can go and you have to quarantine. I think it was like for 2 weeks when you got back. And so I refused the quarantine. I said, because I've got dogs that I've got to take care of at home. I've got, I can't just do this. I was away for work. It's not like I was just doing, leisure travel or whatever it was. So because I didn't show that I had a hotel quarantine or quarantine hotel booked at customs, they wanted to see all of your things, all of your documents, your reservation, whatever. And I said, I don't have it. So they put a sticker on my passport. Now, if I would have known what the little blue sticker was on the back of my passport, I would have just taken it off. But the blue means, oh, you've got to go for a secondary kind of chat with somebody. Stupid me, right? And so I was hearing stories about people who were basically just walking out. So they would go, they'd be checked in, they were stamped, whatever, back into Canada, and would just walk out. They would refuse to speak to the person who was stopping them at the other end and just walking out because you couldn't really be detained for something like that. We heard about stories in Calgary where people, were just walking out, no problem, no questions asked. They didn't have to do the hotel quarantine. It just wasn't enforced. So in Toronto, you heard about how many people were being fined because there would be it was a first $5,000 fine, or I don't know if it was that much at the beginning, but it ended up being about a $6,000 fine that I got. So I went into this little room with a whole bunch of other people. There were people who were very, very upset, people who were very frustrated saying, this is Canada, I'm not fucking doing it, let me go to my house, whatever. Police weren't getting involved because this was more of a provincial matter it was provincial health code, provincial health law. Well, sorry, it was not a law. It was whatever they were calling it. Can't remember the name. So people were just losing their shit, and people were like, then arrest me. Like, throw me in jail then, if that's what it is. I'm not a criminal. I haven't done anything wrong. Let me go to my house. I'm a Canadian. You can't stop me from going home. I've not done anything illegal. So I wait my turn. I go up to the counter, and the woman, she was a snotty, let me just say that she was a cunt. She was a snotty fucking cunt. And it was this attitude. It was attempted intimidation. I'm not afraid of you, you stupid fucking bitch. So you're not going to scare me. But it was this attitude of, so you think that it's okay to risk other people's health by getting on a plane today and not going to the hotel quarantine? And I said, yes, because I don't want to be assaulted. I don't want to be starved with bad food. I don't want to be locked up as a prisoner when I haven't done anything wrong. And I am free to go to my house in Winnipeg. Thank you very much. So that's your attitude of this whole thing. You don't care about people being sick. You don't care about how many people have died. You don't care. I said, I care about my health and safety, and my health and safety is better at home, where I'm able to do this in the comfort, where I have, good food, and I'm able to do it. So I will. And you know how much the fine is. And you're going to have to come all the way back here to appear in court. You know how much that's going to end up costing you? You're going to have to get a lawyer here in Ontario. You're going to have to do this. I said, that's fine. I'd like my ticket, please. Thank you. Wow. Okay. And I said, I was just staying calm. I was not being, and I said, I would like my ticket, please. Thank you. So that's a $6,000 fine you're okay with? And then you're going to fly back here. That's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. And you have to lawyer. I said, I have a lot of money. Thank you. I'd like my ticket, please. Because it was, again, this intimidation of like, she's going to try to convince me. She's just going to try to force me and bully me. Fuck you. Not happening. Not happening. So I was, you have to remember that this was not federal, like it was a federal mandate or whatever you want to call it, but it was deployed by the provincial governments. So it's not like this was a federal thing where my passport's going to be marked and I'm going to be on a no-fly list. I can't travel. That was not the case at all. It was more of, I'm going to have a ticket in Ontario so that if all of a sudden, I'm stopped for a traffic ticket or whatever, they're going to run my name and they'll be like, oh, you have a ticket for $6,000. Well, that's fine. I'll just stay out of Ontario. So I get the ticket and I was just kind of like, whatever. So I go through and now there's a part of me thinking, what if they do put something on my passport? I'm like, no, this is provincial government. My passport is federal government. They're not the same governments. They're not connected. She's just some provincial employee trying to scare me. So, so I go up to the airline. They're like, oh, you're not doing hotel quarantine? I said, nope, I've got a house in Winnipeg. I'm going home tonight. Okay. I said, yep, I am a Canadian and I cannot be stopped from going to my house when I have not committed a crime. So I'd like my seat booked. A window, please. So the best part was after that, I was able to get onto an earlier flight because it's not like there was, 40 people checking into the flight. So I'm sitting at the boarding area and I was just like, well, there's one going to Winnipeg, like an hour and a half or however long, like earlier. So why don't I just jump on them? But I was in such a mood. I was fuming. I was firing back text messages and emails back home. I think I ended up writing a 3-part newspaper column too, just about how I was treated. Like I was embarrassed to be a Canadian based on how I was treated and how things played out. So that was my message in this column was this was disgusting how I was treated. Just the fact that they are treating you like shit. Then they're herding you into these, rooms and people are complaining. And it's like, this defeats the purpose of having the hotel quarantine. Then if you're going to have me in a room with 60 people and we're all sitting there waiting to get, checked into rooms, well, and you're saying it's less safe for me to go on a plane that has fewer than 10 people on it and has more space and is, has air filtration and whatever. So I get on an earlier flight. I come home. It was fine to, I wasn't roughed up when I got home. I go in a taxi or whatever it was. I come to my house and about an hour after I get home, I get an email. My test results from the Toronto airport. Sure as shit. Negative. Now they also gave you a test that you had to bring home with you. You had to do the test halfway through your mandatory 14-day quarantine. I was not allowed out of my house. I went out the next day. Actually, I think I went out almost every day. Because here's the thing. You've got a government saying you're not allowed to go outside and walk and have fresh air. That's essentially what they were telling you. That's what they were saying. You cannot leave your property. You cannot leave your house. You can't go and take your dogs for a walk in the neighborhood. You can't. You have to stay inside. You can't see the light of day. Nope, that's not the Canadian way. I'm sorry. I'm allowed to walk outside. I don't care what you say. So I was supposed to make an appointment, or they were going to call me 7 days in, and then you had to do a video chat with a nurse who was going to basically monitor, supervise you doing this test yourself, and then you were required to send the test in. I don't know if it went to Ottawa or Toronto or somewhere, wherever it went. I was required to, send it back to them. I did not do the test. I did not have a nurse call me. I didn't call anyone. Like I said, I was still, going about the neighborhood and walking the dogs and being in my backyard and, doing all those things. And I carried on with my day. And that was that. And I just look at, you look at the overreactions. And again, remember, they're making decisions in the moment because things were changing, so fast. But it was just weird at the very beginning. You have, Justin Trudeau was the prime minister at the time, and you've got him at the very beginning being fatherly, right? We're in this together. Your government has your back. And, just very comforting. And he was actually applauded for that by a lot of people. It was, a totally different message than, let's say, when Trump, became out there and screaming at people. But then the tone changed and people started to turn on Trudeau because it was lecturous now. It was, do this. If you're not going to do this, then you're not going to do this, and we're going to do this, and then there's going to be protests, right? There was that trucker convoy in Ottawa, and there was going to be arrests, and they're going to freeze bank accounts, and they're going to access your bank accounts, and that was the end of Trudeau's legacy. That was, or, you know, the public opinion was gone at that point. It was kind of already fading anyway. But yeah, I mean, just the way the Canadians were treated as this ramped up, and, you know, people were on edge, and it just got worse and worse and worse. But yeah, I got a $6,000 fine. I've still never paid it all these years later. We should look it up to see if it's even still an active ticket. I don't know. Probably is. But then I would get a letter. I got a letter a few months in basically saying that my driver's license is going to be revoked. My wages, my salary would be garnished. It's like, well, I own the fucking company, and you don't even know how I'm paid, Government of Ontario. So they sent you all these threatening letters, these intimidation letters, and it was just like, fuck off. You could make a court date or, you know, an appearance, or you could appeal it or whatever. And basically I was watching the news stories, and people were, you know, appealing and losing. And I mean, I have $6,000. That's not the issue, but it's like, no, you're not punishing me for going to my house and still to this day never having corona. Like, fuck off. You know what? It's a cash grab. $6,000. Like, no. So that was my travel experience. Now, we're going to take a break because this is a 30-minute segment, which it should not have been. But let's talk about some of those ridiculous things during the pandemic on the Scribble right after this.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter at The Scribble Show and at thescribbleshow.com.
JB here on The Scribble, reliving the corona. And I guess it's still going around, right? I've heard about some celebrities that, you know, recently got it again. So think about the strange things that were happening during the pandemic, right? You had, the one that I remember is like people washing their mail, people washing the groceries. You know, everything was hand sanitizer and gloves and masks and spray and whatever. And I remember actually asking somebody, I said, do you think that we're ever going to get through this? Because there was actually a part of me that did think that this would be forever, that we would be wearing masks all the time. You know, we had taped travel shows in China a few years, 5 years before the pandemic started. I think it was 2017, I believe. And it was weird to me because people were walking down the streets wearing masks. And I just thought, this is strange. Like, why are you walking down the street wearing a mask? I'd said that's not something people would do in Canada. And then sure as shit, however many years in the future, now it's happening. But I do remember having a conversation with somebody saying, I think that we're going to be masks forever. I don't know that we're ever going to be. So we had that whole no handshake thing, right? You have to elbow bump. And it was just, I don't know. It was just so weird. In the grocery store, they had those arrows on the floor so that you could only walk down aisles in a certain direction. And do you remember giving somebody a dirty look if they were walking? How dare they walk towards you? They're walking the wrong way down an aisle. And you sit there and you go, they're still breathing though. Like, that mask is not stopping every single particle. It's not stopping every single thing from circulating in the air. And I think that we all knew that at the time, right? I don't know that anybody who was just wearing one of those little like fabric masks over their face is thinking, I am entirely covered up and not breathing the air around me. And that's just not the case, right? Maybe if you're wearing one of those big, you know, like surgical or whatever that covers your mouth and nose and everything, fine. You know, you're not breathing it all in. But those, you know, those fabric or cloth masks or whatever it was, it's like you still have that space between your nostril and the fabric on the sides. Like, the air is still coming in from that. So I don't understand it, right? And then they have those circles on the floor that you've got to stand, you know, 6 feet behind the person. But then when you're moving up and you're next in line, you're kind of like, well, wait a second. Now I'm breathing in the air that was just breathed out by this person here, even though they're wearing a mask, And so it didn't make sense to me. And then in Canada we had, or at least again in Manitoba, there was the list of products that you couldn't buy, right? You couldn't purchase non-essential items. So it was really weird because you could buy fireworks and hunting knives, but not candles or a kitchen knife. You could, mail was still an essential service. That was the thing. Mail was an essential service because people were still getting, checks from the government, whatever. There were benefit checks or, support checks or whatever that always come in. So mail was an essential service. That was still being delivered. You were able to buy stamps. You could buy envelopes at the post office. Now in Canada, the post office is generally in a drugstore. So you could buy the stamps and the envelope from the post office at the back of the store. But the actual drugstore sells envelopes. You could not buy them from the drugstore. So you argue with the store and you say, well, mail is an essential service and these are envelopes to send mail. So this is mail. We're just following the rules, because apparently there were fines for stores for selling non-essential products. And I said, but the overpriced ones at the drugstore are okay. The generic ones in the little white envelopes, whatever, that I'm paying a reasonable price for, it's illegal to buy those. So we ended up doing a story on or in the newspaper about it, where I said, we challenged this whole thing about what's an essential product. And so the government came back to us and just said, well, we're constantly evaluating the list. But it didn't explain why an envelope is an okay product in one location, but not, in the same building. It's literally 20 feet from the post office. It's the exact same thing, but the store can't sell me an envelope, the post office can. So there were all these really weird kinds of things that you just weren't allowed to buy because they didn't want you going into stores. And I remember, going into one of the drugstores and they had almost like it was caution tape. They had aisles roped off. The shelves were covered with tarps as though, the products aren't there, you can't get them. And I said, do you know what it ends up doing is, and this is what I ended up doing it a few times, it makes you end up just going to a store that has self-checkout. You hide whatever non-essential item, in amongst your things, whatever it was. You're doing the self-checkout by yourself. You're scanning. You buy the non-essential item. You go on your way. And nobody's the wiser. So again, you're just kind of like, well, I'm not allowed to buy paper. I'm not allowed to buy a candle, but I can buy fireworks. There were just some really weird things that you were and you weren't allowed to. And then they didn't have an explanation for that, right? Because I think what ends up happening is there's just things that they did not think of. So then they go and roll this out, and then all of a sudden there's this feedback of, well, what about like day-to-day items that we actually need? I mean, what about that kind of stuff? So that's why they were constantly evaluating. But it was just strange, right? This whole, walk down the aisle the one way, it was just so stupid because we're all still breathing the same fucking air. I don't get it. And so if we're all walking in the same direction, what does that mean though? So like I said, I'm breathing and I'm walking. So my breath is going either up and behind. It's going behind me either way, right? Because I'm walking through it. So whatever is breathed out is now going to be behind me. It's not going to be in front of me. And it's going to be getting the next person. So that's going in the same direction as me. You would almost think it would be logical that you would alternate and have the one person walking one way and then you would have the other person walking another way so that they're not, right? So, but that's when then they're pressed on these things. And I think at the beginning we didn't really question it, right? We just kind of went along with it because it sounds reasonable at the time. And then after a while of doing it, you're kind of just like, this doesn't really make sense. But they're just saying it's the science, right? They're just telling you that that's, it's this, it's airborne, it's blah, blah, blah. Okay, right. But you're having me walk through the cloud of somebody else's because we're having to walk the same direction. You're forcing me to walk down an aisle in one direction. Meanwhile, the air, unless you have fans blowing it was, yeah. The washing the mail thing I never did. I don't know that I ever washed any of my groceries, which again was just kind of weird. I was not neurotic about hand sanitizer and washing my hands. It was the same as I wash my hands all the time. So that, never really changed for me. And again, my husband and I, we have a big house, so it's not like, I never had a feeling of, not claustrophobia, I don't know what the word would be. Cabin, what do you call it? Cabin fever, where you're locked up? Is that what it is? I was just kind of like, whatever. I mean, we got a backyard pool. We can go outside. We can, there's many different rooms. Even if he did get sick, we could theoretically not see each other in the same house for 2 weeks. That's fine because there's enough space for, the two of us. But we were just riding it out, and, you're watching all these things play out, and it was just kind of like, wow. But definitely there was a moment where I did say, I don't know that we're ever going to get through this. But yeah, that elbow thing, and then just kind of, it was just weird. So tell me your thoughts about the whole pandemic. Again, we're not going on this whole anti-vax thing. That's not what I'm not doing that. It's not about politics. I'm just saying these were my memories from it, and this is what I experienced during it. I know people who have had corona, 3, 4, 5 times, and I just sit there going, wow, that's pretty wild. And I guess that's, a symptom of working in a public, in an office space or, around other people. We're fortunate with our media company that I have a radio studio in my house. So that was put in many, 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 many years ago. So if I didn't want to go across the city to our office, I was able, the reason why we did it was I was doing entertainment reporting. So if there was a breaking news story, I'm not going to go all the way, fire up the studio, whatever. So it was like, let's just have one built into the house. I can tape the shows. I can do whatever. I can jump on for our stations if we need to. And so it didn't change our setup at all. I mean, I had hosted the music show from my house many times before, and our staff, we already had the option of doing stuff from home because I didn't have to come in, and so neither did they a lot of the time. So that's not true. Bonnie, I think, had it once. Everybody's had it, I think, except my husband and me. Yeah, that's how we just distance ourselves from the staff. We don't get too close to them. They're staff. You don't, keep your distance. Anyway, send me an email, live, L-I-V-E, at jbonair.com, live at jbonair.com. And we are out of time. So my name is Jeremy Bradley. This is The Scribble. Thank you for listening to my Corona memories. It was a wild time, wasn't it? Just think about that. Like I said, it was 5 years ago that we were producing the stuff in Nashville, and it just seemed like a whole new world that all of a sudden it's like, I don't have to wear a mask. The city is open again. That was still, it was still wishing and hoping in Winnipeg, where I was from. I think it was looking close to getting there, but it wasn't there yet. And like I said, so that was summer of, 2021. So that was a year and a half of, very little contact with people. And yeah. So again, the email address, live, L-I-V-E, at jbonair.com. My name is Jeremy Bradley. This is The Scribble. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.
Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter at The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a speak-free media presentation.
If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some